I wish I could set my rankings on Monday, leave them that way through the entire week. But the fact of the matter is, we get injury news. We have to update projections when we get news like Dallas Goedert's not going to be playing. And also, we can actually use some very valuable data points, such as underdog projections, and figure out exactly how we should be changing our rankings for tomorrow. Now, the first thing that I'm going to want to discuss is I thought we weren't going to have Brock Bowers, but Bowers looks like he's actually going to go. Brock Bowers should be playing. And if y'all remember, we went through and we showed y'all in the stream yesterday that Underdog had moved Jacoby Meyers up to 72.5 receiving yards for his higher lower. And now they've actually moved Jacoby Meyers down to 65.5. I'm going to rank all the projections to give a great sense of how you should be valuing wide receivers against each other, how you should be valuing running backs against each other. But nonetheless, you did see them move Jacoby Meyers down just slightly, but still Meyers is going to be somebody that you are wanting to play. Now, Christian Kirk listed out for Monday. I'll show y'all what we have with Houston Texans receivers. Fact of the matter is, for the love of God, if you have Nico Collins, obviously you're starting him. But outside of that, not really interested in Jaden Higgins outside of a bench stash. Nothing else matters here really other than you have no Godwin. And then also still the left tackle for Tampa is going to be missing this week. And this is going to be very relevant if we look at the projection for the total points scored from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right now, they project to be a below average offense this week with this matchup and no left tackle and no star wide receiver. So this is going to impact the projection that we have with Bucky, who you're still going to start, Nick Buka, who you're still probably going to start, but let me show you what the projections are. Quinshon Judkins officially activated, and Judkins is going to be playing week 2. We'll show you the projections for Dylan Sampson. For me, I would not want to start Judkins. I would not want to start Sampson, neither running back, until we really see what the split of this backfield is going to be. And there's the largest spread in the NFL in this Cleveland Browns and Baltimore Ravens game. They were trying to gaslight us to make us think that Xavier Worthy could be playing this week, but Xavier Worthy is officially ruled out week 2. And then let's see if we have anything else. So the Niners left tackle also is going to be questionable. He popped up on the injury report yesterday. Obviously, we have no Brock Purdy, but I was surprised to see the McCaffrey projection. And we actually have projections still telling us that, you know what, the Niners are going to be a very capable offense. Evan Ingram not listed on the injury report. He should be good to go. But let me just go ahead and start showing you what all these projections are. And let me start just going through and tinkering with our rankings. So I said going into the week that I was going to have McCaffrey ranked at RB1 until we had the Brock Purdy news. And then I was like, I don't know, maybe Mac Jones makes this a worse offense. We moved McCaffrey down to 3. Well, looking at what the projections are right now, you actually do have Christian McCaffrey at higher, lower 115.5 total yards. Saquon Barkley, higher, lower 107.5. Derrick Henry, 103. And Jahmyr Gibbs, 98. So in reality, the projections are still very much in here on CMC being the running back 1. And the fact that you get him in a full PPR format, I do think I'm going to have to move McCaffrey back up to the running back 1 spot, even if I was a little bit worried with no Brock Purdy. And of course, let me just let you know where I'm getting these projections from. If you disagree with any of these, you can always go over to Underdog and you say like, oh, Mason, the Niners offense is going to collapse. There's no way McCaffrey has that many yards. Well, you can always go over there and you can say, Al, I'm going to take CMC to have lower than 115.5 total. But that's why I value these projections a ton, because if Underdog was very far off with them, they could be at risk of losing a lot of money. And I know people are going to say, no, Underdog tries to have 50-50 action on both sides. No, Underdog will put out tweets with numbers saying like, oh, 90% of the people are taking higher on Ibuka, 50.5 total yards. So they're not just going 50-50 here. They are taking a stance, and I think it is valuable for that reason. So I'm going to move CMC up to my running back 1. But the fact of the matter is, all these top 10 running backs are players that you kind of need to start regardless. Like I can go through and show you this next tier of guys that we have with the projections. And right now they have Achane higher, lower, 94.5 total yards. Jonathan Taylor, 94.5. Bijan Robinson, 93.5. So it is interesting to see that Bijan's not in the tier 1 for the projections. And then we have Chase Brown, 91.5. Ashton Jeanty, 90.5. And yes, you are looking at this correctly. Tony Pollard, 89.5. Now, one thing that you can do on flogfantasy.com whenever you want, when you're looking at these rankings, trade calculator, regardless, is you can actually click on the player and bring up their actual stats this season. So we're actually going to have all these loaded into the rankings page default very soon for y'all. For the time being, that is just taking a little bit of time, but let me show you exactly how this looks, right? So say you want to stay up to date with my rankings on the site and you want to sort by Mason Dodd, you want to go through and you want to see Tony Pollard. Well, here you can see that Tony Pollard week 1 played 88% of the snaps. So you combine that with the projection that Pollard is at higher, lower 89.5 total yards. For me, I'd already been calling Tony Pollard a must-start running back. But the fact of the matter is, I think we need to move him up even higher in our rankings. Now, obviously, I also just traded for him in the Flock League, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. I'm not going to move him ahead of like Bucky, Genty, because the fact of the matter is, it's still a bad offense. I don't know if you have a ton of touchdown upside, but I would be putting Tony Pollard right there at about RB12 in our rankings this week, which I know is very aggressive. But again, if you think that's horribly wrong, you are more than welcome to go through and you are more than welcome to take Tony Pollard to have fewer than, I guess since we logged this, I've been doing the research for this. I guess they moved it down a yard, but 88.5 total yards. You can take the lower. The link to Underdog Fantasy is in the description. It's in the comment section. If you use code FLOCK when you sign up to Underdog Fantasy, you're going to get a $50 bonus added into your account after you just play your first $5 with code FLOCK. But let's move over and actually let me just show you all these at the same time, right, at running back. And let me point out what I think is going to be very valuable for you here. So let's go ahead and let's look at this next here. You have Kyron, Bucky, James Conner, and Breece Hall. So Bucky Irving is very low in the projections this week. Again, I would say that we don't necessarily need to take any real actions with this. You're not benching Bucky Irving. We can say the real action was seeing Tony Pollard project out so highly, so you can say, hey, if you have Tony Pollard, you got to start him. But maybe you just temper expectations a little bit with Bucky. I mean, going through and looking at the matchup against Houston, combined with the fact that you have no left tackle in here, and obviously the Bucs left tackle, one of the best in the league. Now, dropping down to our next tier, these are still must-start running backs every single week. Hubbard, James Cook, Kamara, Travis Etienne, Javonte all project similarly to each other. And you may see that my rankings don't line up 100% with these projections, right? One, I don't think these projections are 100% accurate. I do think that Underdog is wrong at certain occasions. I think it's a very good data point for us to look at. But two, also, you have to take into account, if you're looking at Alvin Kamara, we would assume that the overall reception numbers may be higher than a few of these other guys. So we'll move Alvin Kamara higher than where he projects from a total yardage perspective from like 17 up to 13. Now, I can use this as a tiebreaker and put Kyron Williams ahead of him, though, because I had been debating that all week. Now, our next thing that I want to point out is going to be Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams. Both running backs project to be must-start RBs. I actually thought that Travis Etienne was going to project a little bit better than this, because if you look at what we have with the Cincy-Jacksonville game, that game does have the highest over-under of any game in the week. So there should be a ton of points scored, but I'm going to be moving DeAndre Swift behind Javonte Williams based off what we've seen with these projections. And I guess they are very much in on Javonte because you have such a large spread on the game and the Cowboys should be able to run the ball. Now, our next here, Amari Hampton, DeAndre Swift, Tracy, Jordan Mason, Trevion, and Jalen Warren. I'm surprised to see Jordan Mason have such a strong projection in comparison to Aaron Jones. Jordan Mason has the 23rd highest projection of any running back this week with his yardage total in comparison to Aaron Jones at 26. There's about a 7-yard difference from those. So this is going to be enough for me to go ahead and probably move Jordan Mason up a bit in our rankings. I think we would go ahead and just put him ahead of David Montgomery here for this week. Now, I would say with someone like Jordan Mason, I would like to see another week before you actually put him in your lineup. And then the tier of guys that I wouldn't trust, the tier of guys that I'd rather not play, would be Aaron Jones, Dobbins, David Montgomery, Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, Dylan Sampson, Chubb, Pacheco, Stevenson, Benson, and Harvey. What's very interesting to note is Underdog currently has Pacheco higher, lower 47.5 total yards. So if I was looking at this and we were comparing Pacheco higher, lower 7.65 fantasy points to maybe some running backs that I initially had ranked behind Pacheco, whereas you have like, say, Nick Chubb here behind him. You have Zach Charbonnet behind him in my rankings, where Underdog has Pacheco at about 7.5 higher lower fantasy points. Charbonnet up at 9.45. So this is one of those very clear scenarios where I can just look myself in the mirror and go, you know what? Never really was a massive fan of this player. Maybe we are just holding on a little bit too much where he was valued in fantasy drafts this year, despite seeing the obvious data point week 1 that he's just in a 50-50 backfield split. So I'm going to be sliding Isaiah Pacheco down our rankings as well with this data point. Now let's go over and let's look at the wide receiver projections. With the wide receivers, the guys that you know you're going to start regardless will be Chase, Puka, Lamb, Neighbors. It is interesting to note that Neighbors projects to be a tier 1 wide receiver this week in terms of total yardage. Obviously, I'm not going to rank Neighbors inside the tier 1 just because I do think that you have touchdown question marks surrounding the Giants offense that you don't have with the other guys. But from a yardage perspective, that's where Neighbors is at. And then it is also interesting to note that Puka Nacua projects well ahead of what you have with Justin Jefferson this week. Now, going down to our next tier, you have Nico, Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas, London, and Evans. So this is one thing that the projections are really in on. They are really in on the A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith combo. I think a big reason for this is Dallas Goedert goes down. This should be a close game with the Kansas City Chiefs. And now all of a sudden, just every single target's going to get funneled between those two players. So I am going to be moving A.J. Brown up my rankings. I'm going to move him ahead of Mike Evans here. And then obviously we're going to move Devonta Smith up dramatically in a second. But you start all these wide receivers inside the top 11. Then going through and looking at 12 through 19. These are guys that I know that you're going to submit some start-sit questions for me to answer on the live stream. And I'll say, unless you have a juggernaut team or you're playing in a very shallow format, you probably want to get them in. You have Metcalf, JSN, St. Brown, Tyreek, T. Higgins, Sutton, Devonta Smith, and Meyers. Now, you may be interested to see, Mason, how the hell does Jackson Smith and Jigba project to have higher, lower 66.5 total yards, whereas you look at DK Metcalf, who's currently projected higher, lower 68.5 total yards. And what I'll say is, honestly, I'm not going to be ranking Metcalf over JSN. I think JSN, you'll have significantly more reception volume. So in that full PPR format, I'm still going to have JSN here as my top 10 wide receiver, even if he projects out at like 13. But looking at these projections, I think you can see that maybe one, you're getting some narrative going with the revenge game status for DK going up against the Seattle Seahawks. And then two, on top of that with DK Metcalf, you do see Aaron Rodgers look somewhat competent last week. So I do want to go ahead and honestly, I'm going to move Metcalf in my rankings ahead of a lot of these other names that we had behind him. I think we're going to move DK Metcalf. We'll go at the very minimum ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. at about wide receiver 19. Now I'm starting DK Metcalf this week in the Flock League, so I really hope that I am ranking him too low. I really hope he's up here at about 12, but nonetheless, I think we can rank him at 19, rank him as somebody that most of y'all need to start. And then again, the other thing that I need to update with these projections to display them in my rankings will be the Devonta Smith projection. I'm going to also move Tyreek ahead of Jacoby Meyers, where if we were looking at Smith previously, I had him pretty low down here like wide receiver 29. But now that you have no Dallas Goedert, I would go ahead and honestly, I'm going to be moving Devonta Smith up to wide receiver 21, where you see Smith project to be well ahead of some of these other names. Now, let's go ahead and let's look at Tyreek Hill, because I know I've seen a lot of your teams and I've seen that y'all are wanting to bench Tyreek this week. And you can even see this with the expert average ranking on flogfantasy.com. The expert average has Tyreek ranked at wide receiver 26. However, I have Tyreek ranked at wide receiver 17. Now, I already see everybody in the chat going, where is Ibuka? Why is Ibuka not here in the projections? Don't worry, I didn't miss Ibuka. Ibuka is down the page a bit. We'll get to him in 1 second. Like you can see him, he's down here at wide receiver 32 in the projections. Now, I don't have him ranked that low. I think Ibuka has big play upside. I think there's a wide range of outcomes. I think he has a really high ceiling, but we'll talk about him in a second. The next tier of players will be like Tet McMillan, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Hollywood Brown, Zay Flowers, and Ricky Pearsall. Pearsall may be a player that a lot of y'all have questions with because, again, you do have no Brock Purdy, so it's a little bit of a shakier projection when it comes to maybe this entire San Francisco Niners offense. But I think all these are quality starts. And then the players in the tier below this are Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison, George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Keenan Allen, and Ibuka. Now, I completely understand people coming through and saying, Mason, this is crazy to have Ibuka this low. And by all means, if you want to go out there and you want to take the higher than 52.5 total yards in Ibuka or the higher than 9.95 fantasy points on Underdog, you go ahead and you do you. But for me, I think that we need to be a little bit realistic about this. We have Ibuka here at wide receiver 23 in my rankings, because again, I think you have the big play upside, blah, blah, blah. But right now, sportsbooks are projecting out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be a slightly below average offense this week against the Texans. And at the same time, while Ibuka, phenomenal college player, phenomenal prospect, round one draft capital, and at the same time, you get the strong week one performance. Week one, you did get a total of 6 targets and 4 receptions for Ibuka. Now, he had 2 receiving touchdowns, which is super exciting, but I think we need to just temper expectations a bit, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if week 2, he does regress slightly. Then the other player that I want to point out will be Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison, I also have ranked higher than the projections, but Harrison's down here, wide receiver 27. The projections are also very high on James Conner this week, so I think the expectation is in Arizona, you still have Trey McBride as the number 1 guy there, and at the same time, they are probably going to run the ball. Now, going down to our next tier, DJ Moore projects very poorly. DJ Moore is higher or lower about 50.5 total yards, 33 with the overall projections. I'm going to be moving DJ Moore down to the bottom of this tier realistically. Like, I think I'm going to have Calvin Ridley over him, because the thing with DJ Moore is, one, it's not a spot that you're in love with going up against the Detroit Lions. And 2, Rome Odunze actually drew more targets than him. So you can see the projections are very close with DJ and Rome. So for me, I think that I'm going to go ahead and I need to have them a little bit closer together in my rankings. I may even put them in the same tier, to be honest. And then looking at other things that we need to point out, Waddle projects to be very similar to like Rome. Shakir projects to be the number 1 guy over Keon Coleman in Buffalo. I would rather have Keon, though, because I think you have bigger play upside. I think Shakir's maybe a higher floor option. And then the other thing that I really want to point out here is Michael Pitman Jr. projects very poorly this week. Wide receiver 40 in the projections. Before I even checked this, I also had Michael Pitman Jr. wide receiver 40 in my rankings. I would just warn you against going through and jamming Pitman in, thinking that, oh, he looked phenomenal in this Indianapolis Colts offense is all of a sudden amazing. The fact of the matter is with Pitman, you are looking at a wide receiver going from one of the best matchups you could possibly ask for against the Miami Dolphins to now all of a sudden one of the worst matchups you could possibly ask for going up against the Denver Broncos. So I would be hesitant. I, in general, want to tell y'all to bench Michael Pitman Jr. I hope I'm wrong, because I have drafted him in a bunch of Underdog best ball drafts, but honestly, I'm going to be fine if he takes a week off, because I have to play against him in the Flock League this week. So I'd like for him to cool it a bit, but I'm not going to pull the projections for quarterback and tight ends. Obviously, if you're not on Underdog, at the very minimum, I would hop on just so you can actually use this as a valuable data point when it comes to just making start-sit decisions. And you can go, oh, like, I'm interested in Michael Pittman Jr. versus DK Metcalf. And then go ahead and see, like, oh, they have Michael Pittman Jr. higher, lower, 8.5 points. And then DK Metcalf is higher, lower, 12.5. Man, it probably gives you a good indication you should start DK Metcalf. Not saying these are always 100% going to be accurate. If you think, Mason, these are horribly inaccurate, by all means, go take Ibuka to have higher than 9.95 fantasy points. But I'm going to lean on the side that they're a valuable data point that we should be looking at every Saturday to make sure that there is nothing horribly wrong with my ranks. And that's what we just did here. So let me publish these on the site. And then also we have our quarterback rankings. We have our tight end rankings on the site as well. Again, I want to reiterate just how you can go through and look at my rankings specifically. I know there's some confusion with this. And I know the new rankings page looks a little bit awkward. You just got to give us a day or two. We're going to be loading in every relevant 2025 fantasy football stat for when you go to these ranks. But like if you pull up the week 2 quarterback rankings, or say like the week 2 running back rankings, These are not my rankings here. These are the expert average. If you want to use my rankings, instead of doing the expert average, go through and hit Mason Dodd, hit save, and then you can see my rankings and you can see them in the tiers as well. But I think that's all I got for y'all with this stream specifically. I'm going to watch the rest of this University of Texas game. Hook 'em Horns, not super exciting. We're playing UTEP. It is what it is. But of course, I will be live tonight answering all your fantasy football questions. I'll be live tomorrow morning for 5 hours answering questions. So please, if you want to ask me anything, we're going to be giving away a ton of free questions as we do every single live stream. I would just subscribe to the channel and hit the bell next to the subscribe button so YouTube tells you when we go live. Because again, I'll be answering questions every single day until Christmas, and be answering as many free questions as we possibly can as well. And then if y'all wanted to go through and say like, oh, there's no way Metcalf has 68.5 receiving yards. Oh, there's no way Michael Pitman Jr. doesn't have higher than 43.5. You can find Underdog Fantasy with the link in the description comment section. Like I said, code FLOCK will get you $50 added to your account after you play your first 5. And at the same time, Underdog Fantasy is available in almost every state. They're available in more than 40 of them. And at the same time, they're available in all the big ones. But I think that's all I got for you. I really appreciate you. And I really hope I can see you out in the live stream later tonight and answer some of your